Good afternoon. We're back with another episode of the Lord of the Rings LCG Progression Series, and today is the lore and quest guide for the Siege of Cair Andros. So like into Ithilien, this is a branching paths quest. Let's look at the lore. The island fortress of Cair Andros, which guards Gondor's northernmost causeways over the river Anduin, is under siege. Battering rams rumble up the eastern causeway, and rafts filled with orcs float across the river toward the lightly defended northern banks. So, if you recall, this quest line from the Heirs of Numenor expansion began with Peril and Pelargir being located there to the southwest of Minas Tirith. Then we proceeded through Ithilien and up to Cair Andros, which is where the Siege of Cair Andros takes place. One point in the books where Cair Andros is mentioned is toward the end of Return of the King, when the heroes were marching on the Black Gate. Some of the soldiers got scared and didn't want to go any further, and so Aragorn sent them to take Cair Andros instead. So let's talk about the quest. The assault is relentless and the defenders grow weary. The tide is slowly but surely turning against you. Then there are a variety of paths you can take, reinforcing the banks as smoke and rending cries fill the air. Rafts of orcs beach their crafts all along the northern banks. You must reach the shore and drive them back into the river before a solid foothold can be established. Breakthrough at the approach. With a crashing boom, the eastern gate shatters. A ram has broken through, and the pressing host of orcs pour into the courtyard beyond. Engage them in hand-to-hand combat and secure the gate. Breakthrough at the Citadel. Orc scramblers have infiltrated the island and climbed over the walls. They fought to the western gate, and the gate fell. Now a new host of enemies that were lying in wait are breaching the Citadel itself. And the last battle. The defenders of Cair Andros have survived brunt upon brunt of the enemy's assault, but the outcome of the battle hangs on the edge of a knife. One last heroic effort is required to save the fortress and win the victory. So, like Ithilien, this is a branching paths quest, and each path can require a different kind of questing. Phase 1, the one you start with. To start, we add these 3 locations to the staging area, and these locations are the mechanism by which you will decide which path you want to take. Should you clear the banks by making it the active location or by exploring it, it leaves play and you remove stage 2. If you don't remove any stage, you have to proceed through this quest as normally, which means you would have to do siege questing in phase 1, normal questing in phase 2, in which you have to reveal an additional encounter card, battle questing in phase 3, siege questing in phase 4, and siege questing in phase 5, or possibly battle questing, depending on if you have 4 victory points or more. So as I talked about into Ithilien, it is extremely difficult to build a deck which can both battle quest and willpower quest, because most cards at this phase in the game do not have both attack and willpower in high quantities, nor do they have both shields and willpower in high quantities. If you're going to do willpower, you can either do willpower or you can do battle siege questing, because some cards do have shields and attack. It's much easier to build a deck that way. Well, I wouldn't say that some cards have shields and attack. I would say there is a sphere, which is high in cards that has shields and attack, which is the tactic sphere. There is no sphere that's high in cards that has willpower and attack, or willpower and shields. Willpower is pretty much exclusively, at this point in the game, a spirit trait. So very difficult to build a deck that can do both battle and willpower questing, or siege and willpower questing. If you're going to have to pick two out of those three, willpower, battle, and siege, you want to do battle and siege. So you want to choose, my recommendation is to choose a path through this quest which will have you doing battle and siege only, and no willpower questing if you can help it, which means you don't want to go down path 2, which means you do want to clear the banks as quickly as possible. Now, this card says if the banks has 3 or more damage, remove it from the game. There are a number of different encounter cards which can deal damage to locations in the staging area. For example, players must deal damage from undefended attacks to the lowest threat battleground location in play. If there are no battleground locations in play, immediately advance to the next stage. So, if you take any attack undefended, the damage will go first on the banks, then on the approach, then on the Citadel. Therefore, it's very important in Phase 1 not to take any undefended attacks. If you should clear Phase 2, you can then proceed to battle questing if you like. After the player's quest unsuccessfully, instead of raising threat, each player must choose and discard one character he controls. So important there not to quest unsuccessfully. That siege to battle is a much better path than siege to normal. Siege to normal is much harder to build a deck for than siege to battle. However, there's an even better path available. We don't have to clear Phase 3 if you clear the approach from staging. After the approach leaves play as an explored location, remove Stage 3 from the quest deck. So if you proceed, if you clear the banks and clear the approach, you will proceed from Stage 1 to Stage 4, which is a siege quest. So you'll be proceeding from siege to siege. Now, this says breakthrough at the Citadel adds 5 threat to the staging area. However, I have found in my playthroughs that's not that big a deal. Once you clear Stage 4, you'll move on to Stage 5, Siege Questing. Reveal 1 card per player from the encounter deck and add it to the staging area. If the players have collected 4 or more victory points, the last battle gains battle and loses siege. So you have the option of clearing all 3 of the locations from staging and eliminating Stage 2, 3, and 4. However, if you do that, you'll proceed from battle questing in Phase 1, or siege questing in Phase 1, to battle questing in Stage 2, or Stage 5. If you clear 2, 3, and 4 out of the staging area, you'll just be left with these 2, siege questing and battle questing, because you'll have 4 victory points in the staging area, or in the victory display you'll have 3, 4, 5, 6 victory points. So you will proceed from siege to battle. Now, that is not my recommendation. My recommendation is to go from 1 to 4 to 5. And the reason is, if you clear these 2 out, clear Phase 2 and 3, you'll go from 1 to 4. It'll be siege to siege. And then if you move to the last battle, you will have 3 victory points, which means you'll continue to do siege questing. So if you take this path 1, 4, 5, you will go siege, 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 which means you only have to build your deck to do one thing. If you clear 3 from the staging area as well, you can go 1, 5, but you have to go siege, battle. And I have found it's easier to go siege, 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 even though you have an extra stage in there, than it is to go siege, battle, because of the difficulty in building a deck that is strong in both battle and siege questing. It's much easier to build a deck that focuses on just one thing, even if you have to add 1 additional stage. That 1 additional stage is only 5 progress. With 5 threat in the staging area, that's not a big deal. That's not a big enough deal to dissuade me from building a siege-only deck, as opposed to a deck that needs to go from sieging to battling. So that's my recommendation. And you remove Stage 2 and 3 because neither of those are siege. If you want to build a deck that's strong in only one thing, siege, you don't want to do phase 2 where you need willpower, and you don't want to do phase 3 where you need battling. So you siege in phase 1, you clear out the banks as quickly as possible before it can take on enough damage that it gets removed, because then you'll have to go to phase 2. You clear out phase 3, and then you just leave the Citadel where it is. Allow it to be destroyed, or ignore it. Don't move to it. Don't explore it. Move from phase 1 to phase 4 to phase 5, and you'll be sieging the entire way. And that is a easier deck to build than a deck that's trying to siege and battle, or siege and willpower and battle. So let's look at some of the encounter cards that can make life difficult. The Mumok is a big deal. I don't think I've won this quest when I've gotten the Mumok. We've got Lieutenant of Mordor, who allies can't defend against. And he resolves the when revealed effect on the topmost treachery when he's revealed, which can't be cancelled. We have a Siege Raft, which deals 2 damage to the lowest threat battleground in play, which means you can't delay on clearing the banks. It can get destroyed pretty quickly. We've got the Masters Malice. Each player chooses 1 sphere of influence. Each character a player controls that does not belong to a sphere takes 3 damage. This punishes you for not playing a monosphere deck. If you were, for example, playing a leadership spirit deck and you chose leadership, all of your spirit characters would take 3 damage if you can't cancel this. And if you were playing a card like Eowyn, like a hero like Eowyn, this would just straight up kill her. So in my playthrough, I played a monosphere tactics deck that was focused entirely on siege, and I recommend something like that if you're struggling with this quest. If you're struggling with this quest and you play a monosphere tactics deck entirely focused on siege and you go from 1 to 4 to 5, that is the easiest way to beat this quest, I've found. It's not thematic, giving up an area of the battlefield on purpose, but think of it this way. You're choosing to make your stand at the Citadel, and you're falling back to that point because you consider it the most defensible. That's how I see it, from a thematic point of view. So we've got Orc Vanguard, which has 8 attack, and while it's in the staging area, resources cannot be spent from the resource pools of heroes who have a leadership spirit or lore resource icon, so it's encouraging you to play monosphere tactics, which I think makes the most sense. Battering Ram, if the active location is a battleground, deal 3 damage to it. If you reveal that on the first round, it'll just destroy the banks and totally ruin your plans. Probably just mean a concede if you're playing the siege deck that I recommended. The Power of Mordor, count the number of encounter cards in the staging area and shuffle them into the encounter deck. That can prevent you from clearing the locations you want to clear. Very annoying. So this quest is not easy, and that is why in True Solo I'm recommending a specific path through it, which will give you the highest chance of success because you can build a focused deck which only needs to do one thing well, which is Siege Quest. Even so, there's cards that can ruin your day, but that gives you the highest chance of success in my opinion, if you're struggling with this quest. Hopefully that makes sense. Doing the quest this way is not all that complicated really, in my opinion. I played cards like Winged Guardian with its 4 shields, Support of the Eagles, which can add those 4 shields to another character, and you can really get some strong willpower going with like Defender of Ramas as well. You can really get some strong willpower going, or not willpower, but some strong questing power going with a lot of siege power on the board. And you'll still have like Bjorn available or Boromir available to battle. So I've found that path through the quest relatively mild, but if you try to fight the deck and go with like clearing all the locations and go from siege to battle, or if you try to go through like number 2 or number 3 or something random like that, you're going to have a rough time because this is a difficult quest. So my recommendation is to go 1-4-5. and build a deck exclusively for Siege. So hopefully that's helpful or at least entertaining. And thanks for watching.